It happened within the first couple seconds. Kurtis MacDermid going toe-to-toe against Matt Rempe in retaliation for some of his antics. Who was in the right, who was in the wrong, and what happened afterwards, because it just wasn't those two squaring off. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. The TNT was brought to TNT. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Chalky, play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. It happened. Brawl at the Garden. Kurtis MacDermid and Matt Rempe took center stage within the first couple seconds of the matchup. On national TV, the New Jersey Devils and New York Rangers brought the TNT to TNT. And I think it's safe to assume that the fans got more than what they bargained for. In the first segment of today's show, that's what we're exclusively going to be talking about. What led up to it? Was it justified? Who came away victorious? How do the Devils and Rangers move past this? And I actually have a concrete example that I wrote about for Pucks and Pitchforks that I want to share with you guys. And we're going to discuss all that momentarily. Then in the second segment, like I said, this fight took place a couple seconds in the matchup. And after everything was settled, you still had a game to be played. I know tensions were high, but it was still a decent matchup for the casual hockey fan. Obviously, if you're a Devils fan, you were kind of sour with the result because it was gearing up to probably be one of the biggest games of the year for New Jersey. Unfortunately, they came away on the losing end by a score of 4-3. And then in the third and final segment, like I do with every post-game recap, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. All right, let's talk about the opening couple second brawl that took place between the Rangers and the Devils, particularly Rempe and MacDermid. This has been a long time coming. Actually, it's been building up for nearly 2 months before MacDermid officially joined the Devils. Because if you recall, in late February, Matt Rempe, his first go-around against the Devils, he laid a big hit on Nathan Bastian, and Bastian got shaken up. Rempe gets ejected. Bastian does return, but then he goes toe-to-toe later on in the game against Jacob Trouba, and Bastian sustains a lower body injury, and he has been sidelined ever since. You would think that Matt Rempe learned his lesson. Well, a couple weeks later at Madison Square Garden, when MacDermid is now officially on the Devils roster, he wanted Rempe to pay the piper, but Rempe turned down the fight. But later on in the game, Rempe had a dirty play on Jonas Siegenthaler by elbowing him in the side of the face that sidelined Jonas for nearly a month. And Rempe got suspended for that. He was sidelined for 4 games. And MacDermid said he lost a lot of respect for Rempe, saying that you got to answer the bell in that sort of way. It's NHL protocol. It's NHL etiquette. And he was just hoping that Rempe would learn his lesson. And obviously, a few weeks goes by. We're in early April. This is the last matchup between the Rangers and Devils this season. Rangers are going to the playoffs. Devils, unfortunately, their playoff chances are, I would say, at 0% at this point. But there's still a lot of pride at stake between these cross-river rivals. And people were anticipating for MacDermid and Rempe to drop the gloves once they entered into the game. And the thing is that Rempe, prior to this matchup, was actually a scratch for the Rangers, and MacDermid had been dealing with injury. There was no guarantee that both these players were going to suit up in this matchup, and basically that's what everyone was wondering. Peter Laviolette didn't give any indicator pre-game that Rempe was going to make the lineup, but it was revealed that MacDermid, he was good to go. Then it was later revealed that Rempe would be in the lineup. And not only that, both players would be in the starting lineup And you could see a mile away what this was building up to. And MacDermid, he wasted no time. He dropped the mitts. But not only that, a few other players between the Rangers and Devils dropped the mitts. In fact, every player, with the exception of the goalies, went to battle with someone. Keandre Miller, John Marino. John Marino, unfortunately, came away on the losing end of that matchup. Kevin Ball and Barclay Goodrow. Jimmy Vesey and Curtis Lazar. Vesey actually tackled Lazar onto the ground. Then as soon as it looked like it was over, Lazar kind of got some payback by tumbling on top of him. Jacob Trouba and Chris Tierney. And obviously, the camera was focused on Matt Rempe and Kurtis MacDermid, two heavyweights going toe-to-toe. Obviously, I wish that TNT did a little bit more of a wide camera angle so that way we could see all the fights in real time. But I get that you have to focus on MacDermid and Rempe because that's the main narrative going into this battle. And I got to say, both of them got some decent licks on one another. You noticed on Rempe's hand that it seemed like he had a few cuts, and then you saw that he was actually bleeding from his lip, and his visor cut him up a couple times. And MacDermid, he's a big body. He is the tallest forward on the team, and he's also the heaviest player on the Devils roster. He is not an easy guy to go toe-to-toe against, and I got to give Rempe credit. He did hold his own. If I had to pick a winner, I would say MacDermid won it in that case, but not by that much, and it was definitely an interesting battle between those two respective players, and Rempe finally got his comeuppance, but the chaos did not end there, and it was deemed by the referees that Curtis Lazar and Jimmy Vesey dropped the mitts first, and afterwards, whoever was fighting was going to be assessed a game misconduct, because if one fight takes place and then another one takes place afterwards, that's a secondary altercation, and as a result, you're going to be assessed a game misconduct. So Miller, Marino, MacDermid, Rempe, Ball, Goodrow, Trouba, Tierney all hit the showers early after 2 seconds of play. It was madness. It was crazy. And I'm sure the fans got more than what they anticipated. And I'm sure everyone was happy with that. And a lot of people are wondering, was it worth it in the end because 8 players ended up getting the boot? And I would say this, it was worth it for the Devils because similar to what MacDermid said in his post-game interview after he was trying to fight Rempe and Rempe turned it down early on in March, you got to follow a certain etiquette if you want to be an enforcer, which is you injured not one, but 2 Devils players. Bastian is still out, and Siegenthaler sustained a head injury, and that is dangerous. You got to pay your dues in that sort of aspect. Cam Janssen appeared on this show in summer 2022, and he described his incident with Thomas Caberlet, and I actually wrote an article about this for Pucks and Pitchforks recently. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out, but basically, we all remember what happened in 2007. Cam Janssen had a late hit on Thomas Caberlet, and Caberlet is hurt so bad that he got knocked out cold, and he had to be taken out of the game via a stretcher. Janssen was benched the rest of the game. He was suspended, but a couple weeks later, the Devils travel up north, and Janssen knew what was coming. He was going to have to go toe-to-toe with the late Wade Belak. And afterwards, Janssen said that it felt like he was having a heart attack sitting in the penalty box after he went toe-to-toe with the big boy Wade Belak, but he understood the circumstances. And in his words, he knew that he had to pay the piper as a result of his actions. And he admitted he did get Caberlet late. And in real time, things are a little bit different. And I think the same can be said for Rempe, which is, I don't care what your intent was against Bastian or Siegenthaler, it still happened. And fun fact for you, in all 3 matchups that Rempe has played against the Devils, he has been ejected in all 3 games. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Rempe momentarily, but going back to Cam Janssen, that's a good example as to how NHL etiquette works, because it doesn't matter if it was intentional or not. It doesn't matter what the circumstances were. You laid a big hit that injured a player, and you're going to have to face their biggest opponent. And afterwards, Peter Laviolette was exchanging words with Travis Green, and it just goes to show you how chaotic this game was. And I don't understand why Peter Laviolette was barking at Travis Green, because you didn't have to put Matt Rempe into the starting lineup. Hell, you didn't even need to put him in, period. That was a choice. I don't know what you anticipated. I'm sure it got a little out of hand, but that's what happens. And you made that decision. You had him taking line rushes at a recent practice because you anticipated for him to play against the Devils. But after the first period, 162 penalty minutes, and we saw Cooley lay a big hit on Smith, and Mercer, usually very calm, cool, collected, focuses on doing the dirty work for the Devils. He dropped the mitts and he got into a fight, albeit Mercer kind of got the short end of the stick because he was assessed an instigator, fighting, and a misconduct, which I don't really agree with because that was a big hit from Cooley and it could have hurt Smith. But to each their own. I think the referees were just trying to send a message and just say, like, you got to tone it down now. You got your hits, you got your revenge. You got to focus on playing the game. But nonetheless, it was just absolute chaos. And it was necessary. And I think it's great for hockey, because this happened on national TV. It's a rivalry game between the Rangers and the Devils. And the Devils, they have nothing to lose at this point. And the Rangers, they lost some key assets. They lost their captain, Jacob Trouba. They lost Keandre Miller. And obviously, Rempe got into another altercation. And my parents always told me, don't fight someone that has nothing to lose. And in this case, the Devils have everything to gain because they get the revenge, they get the satisfaction, they get under your skin, but they're not going to the playoffs. The Rangers are. And I can already anticipate the amount of hate I'm going to get from Ranger fans in the comment section. And I have a little bit of a message for Matt Rempe, which is, if you want to be an enforcer, that's fine, but you can't pick and choose when to drop the mitts. And look what happened when you turned down a fight with Kurtis MacDermid, because this all could have been over in early March. But instead, you turned it down. You had an elbowing call assessed to you after hitting Jonas Siegenthaler. You got suspended. You unleash a can of worms, and now you're creating this big X on your back. And I'm sure that's not what you want heading into the playoffs and how to establish yourself in the NHL, because Matt Rempe is still in his first season. That's my message to Rempe, which is, I love the physicality. I love that you're not afraid to drop the mitts, but you got to tone it down a little bit. The kid still has a lot to learn at the NHL level, and I don't wish ill intent on anyone, and I don't wish for anyone's career to fail. But at the same time, you just got to know that this all happened because you didn't follow the unwritten rules of being an NHL player. And that's my only message to Matt Rempe. Love the fight, but let's just put it to bed now. It's over. And this is the final time this season which the Rangers will take on the Devils. And the last time the Devils beat the Rangers was in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup playoffs almost a year ago. All right, we're going to transition to the game in general, and I'll share some of my main takeaways. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Sleeper, because regardless of where the Devils are at in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times in cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Don't just have to participate in daily fantasy hockey. You can participate in football, basketball, baseball, college football. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Devils fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right. After all of that, after all the bedlam antics, after the chaos, after the carnage, after the repercussions, after 8 players hitting the showers early and 162 penalty minutes assessed after 20 minutes of play, you still had a game on hand between the Rangers and the Devils. And unfortunately, the Devils came out on the losing end by a score of 4-3, and they have been swept by the Rangers this season. 4 matchups and 4 losses. In this game, the Devils got off to a pretty bad start, minus the fight, because that was what they were trying to do at the beginning, but I've talked enough about that. The Devils got behind early, 2-0. Artemi Panarin, he got the party started for the Rangers, and the Devils actually tried challenging that goal for offsides, and they got it wrong, and as a result, the Rangers went on to the power play. It's been a while since I've seen a coach challenge an offsides call and get it wrong, because you have all that technology, you have all that replay. Usually it's clear as day or it's very close, but in this case, the Rangers, they go on to another power play, and then Alexis Lafreniere, he made it 2-0, and it seemed like it was going to be a long night for the Devils. But in the second period, they scored 3 unanswered goals, and this goes back to their previous problem against the Penguins, which is when the Devils have momentum, when they score a bunch of unanswered goals, when they jump off to a lead, it seems like they shoot themselves in the foot, because Andre Palat had a good one-timer shot from Jack Hughes. Great setup. Palat now in double-digit goals with 10, and he cut the lead in half. Brendan Smith always gets goals when you least expect it. I know he's not a goal scorer, but I remember he scored in the outdoor game. He scored in this matchup. It just seems like Smith on the big stage knows when to find the back end net, and he tied the game thanks to an assist from Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier. Timo Meier continues to stay hot. And then I think the biggest goal of the game for Devils, the one that got people talking on social media, was Jesper Bratt and his razzle-dazzle, because it just wasn't this goal. Bratt had a few opportunities himself, point blank in front of Igor Shesterkin, to try to find the back of the net himself. He was putting on a show at the Garden, and in this case, putting Adam Fox in spin cycle and setting Nico Hischier up on a dime. Jesper Bratt has been incredible this season, and he's already surpassed his career high in points. But I want to talk about Nico Hischier a little bit, because in 65 game appearances, he has 62 points. And are people forgetting that he missed almost a month of action due to a head injury he sustained thanks to Connor Clifton early on in the year? Why aren't more people talking about that? Because on social media, I continue to see videos that are out of context, nonetheless, of Hischier, quote unquote, not being a good captain or a good leader, but he's been putting up some great production and is close to being a point per game player, but yet no one is really talking about what Hischier brings in terms of a hockey standpoint. And yes, he's not a vocal leader, and he will admit that, but he leads by example, and I think he's been doing a great job. I don't really understand why Nico Hischier has been catching so much slack from the Devils faithful, but nonetheless, it's 3-2 in favor of the Devils. And I think one of the things that they were hammering home on the broadcast was that you saw the Devils just cutting off the lanes for the Rangers. They love that east-west style of hockey, and the Devils were doing a good job of just negating that in the second period. And there's a reason why the Rangers are good 5-on-5. They're absolutely dangerous, and the Devils had to try to match that same energy, and you saw that in the second period. However, in the third period, I noticed 2 things from the Devils. One, they made a few mistakes that unfortunately they couldn't control. And the second thing is, it seemed like the players were gassed and it was going to be a drag to the finish line. I know a lot of people have been bashing on Luke Hughes, saying he's not this, he's not that, and I get it. The kid's a rookie. Like, he was going to hit the rookie wall. I don't know what people were anticipating towards the end of the season. Of course, his energy is not the same as it was at the beginning of the year, but we need to give a lot of credit to Luke Hughes. That kid played nearly 33 minutes because John Marino and Kevin Ball, like I said in the first segment, were one of the many players that hit the showers early due to that scuffle match between MacDermid and also Rempe. Similar to the Rangers, the Devils were only playing 4 defensemen, but half of those defensemen are rookies. Shimon Nemets, Luke Hughes. Shimon Nemets, he played about 26 minutes. Luke Hughes, he played for more than half of the game. And he actually led the team in time on the ice. Of course, he's going to be tired. Of course, he's going to be fatigued. And then in the third period, we saw him break his stick on one possession, and he tried his best to get back and guard Kakko. Unfortunately, it came up empty. And that was a mistake, yes, but unfortunately it was a mistake that he couldn't control. And he hit a direct strike at Kako, and Kako just fumbled the puck into his favor. And Luke Hughes, he had nothing but just his body to try to slow him down. And then later on in the period, you saw Chris Kreider. I always said this during the playoffs, but Chris Kreider, he just knows how to kill the Devils on the power play. Brendan Smith, he goes off for hooking, and Devils are on PK once again. And Kreider tipped it in thanks to Fox and Panarin, and it was 4-3 in favor of the Rangers, and that's all she wrote for the Devils. It wasn't the worst game in the world for New Jersey considering the circumstances, but I'm sure they would have liked to play better, but it just is what it is. It's just quintessential as to how the Devils season has gone, which is they give up the first goal. They play good hockey in spurts of the matchup. They can't play the full 60, but at least they showed some heart against the Rangers, and at least they were sticking up for their brothers and Nathan Bash and Yoda Siegenthaler, because this all happened because of Matt Rempe, unfortunately, being a little too chaotic for his own good. And one of the complaints that people have for this Devils team is like they don't play with heart, they don't play with physicality, and anytime a player touches one of their stars like Nico Hischier or Jack Hughes, it doesn't seem like they retaliate, and that's why they got someone like Kurtis MacDermid. So I would say with all the circumstances in place, with everything that's happened throughout the course of the game, especially where the Devils are at and where the Rangers are at in comparison, I'm actually okay with this game. And yes, it sucks that the Devils got swept by the Rangers, but at this point, the Devils are just playing for pride, and they're just looking for some sort of positive momentum to take into the offseason, as it's going to be a drag to the finish line, guys. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Now, like I do with every post-game recap, I will compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade. But before we continue, let me tell you about FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on the tournament, baseball, basketball, NHL, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Shots on goal differential 41-20 in favor of the Rangers. Kaapo Kähkönen was in net for the Devils. Did he have his best game? No, but he had a better performance than Jake Allen did against the Penguins. Expected goals against was about 3.42. Actual goals against was 4. Goals save above expected, minus 0.58. Obviously, I'm sure Kähkönen would like to make some of those crucial saves, but like I said, in comparison to Jake Allen's performance against the Penguins, much better against the Cross River rival. And Kähkönen hasn't been playing as much as of late because Jake Allen has been the better goalie for the Devils. And remember, prior to that Islanders matchup, I think Kähkönen was riding a personal 11-game losing streak dating back to his days with San Jose, doing anything to boost his confidence up a little bit more. But like I said, Kähkönen is just a for now situation for Devils. Face-off percentage, 55.7% to the Devils, 44.3% to the Rangers. Power play, Rangers were 1 for 3 thanks to Kreider. Devils were 0 for 3 on the man advantage. Penalty minutes, do I even need to say it? 88 to the Devils, 78 to the Rangers. Oh boy, I don't think I'm ever going to see that number that high ever again. Hits, even 15 apiece. Block shots, 13-12 in favor of the Rangers. Giveaways, Rangers led that department 11-3. Takeaways, Rangers led 6-5. If I had to give the Devils a letter grade, I don't normally do this just because they did come away on the losing end and they did kind of collapse. But considering the circumstances, this was actually a very competitive game. Devils showed a lot of heart. And I mentioned in the second segment, they put a lot of their trust in some players that had to step up big time, including Luke Hughes, including Shimon Nemec, because the Devils were down to 4 defensemen. I'll give them a B-. I can't give them a B or a B+ because they did end up losing. But at the same time, just everything that's happened, I think the Devils made this a very exciting matchup and iconic in a sense, because I saw this fight trending on social media. ESPN was talking about it. Bleacher Report was talking about it. It was all over the news. And I like that because, like I said in the first segment, rivalry game between the Rangers and the Devils. and the Devils just basically trying to stick up for themselves. And I think a lot of people are definitely going to be tuning in next year when the Rangers take on the Devils. But everything happened. It's over now. Water on the bridge. It's never water on the bridge against a rival, but still, you get what I'm saying. Everything has been, I guess, resolved for the most part. I think the Devils took everything they could into their hands. But as for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What did you think about the opening night brawl? And it's funny because I was talking with Jersey Joe about this during the playoffs last year, and he suggested in game 2 that the Devils just begin the game with a full-out brawl to make a statement. Obviously, I disagreed with it, but it's funny how things work out within the next few months because even though this is not the playoffs, the Devils still made a statement by dropping the mitts against the Rangers. But I think some Rangers players got the better of some Devils opponents, but nonetheless, still entertaining to watch. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.